Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and with Mother's Day just around the corner, this cake is absolutely perfect, but this is also a great any occasion cake as well. So what I did there was I put a little bit of shortening on there. That has been sitting in the fridge overnight, and it has formed a crust because it is an American buttercream. So I did put a little bit on there just to make sure that this fondant would adhere to it. You'll notice that I also put some on the upper edge as well. This is because I'm going to be actually wrapping the fondant around this time rather than placing it over top like I normally do. Reason being is because this is going to be a very fondant heavy cake, and I know I'm going to be covering the whole upper portion, so I want to eliminate the fondant where I can. Now, I was planning on covering this whole cake in the marshmallow fondant that I made, but unfortunately I didn't have enough, so I did end up mixing this with a little bit of satin ice as well, which is my favorite fondant brand. So if you want to check out my video on how to make that marshmallow fondant, you can go ahead and click that video in the right-hand corner. Then you'll notice that I did cut off the fondant at the seam, anything extra, and I made sure before I cut that both seams actually touched. And now I'm cutting off more of the excess. The reason why I do that initial cut is just to make sure that nothing is weighing anything down. Then I'm keeping my X-Acto knife in place and I'm turning the cake stand. This ensures that I get a fairly even and straight cut all the way around. This is why it's also really important to have that crumb coat fully set so that you can take off pieces super easily and not have it lift. Try to smooth away that seam as best as you can, but this will be going towards the back. Now, what I do like about this is because I went for a kind of a marbled look, it really doesn't make the seam look that obvious. Then taking the same marbled fondant that I had earlier, I'm just cutting a few strips. And this is going to mimic the look of those really nice, luxurious flower boxes. I really feel like adding the strips on really adds to the detail of the cake, and it really makes the cake look like one of those flower boxes. You'll notice that I'm also steaming my cake. I get asked a lot about the materials that I use. This clothing steamer is nothing special. It's just a regular run-of-the-mill clothing steamer, but I will leave everything that I'm using down in the description box below so you can check out those items for yourself. The bottom little line is easy to keep straight. The top one is a little bit more tricky, so don't feel like you can't play around with it to get it right. Now I'm using this little tool, and it's really hard to see here, but I was basically just adding a little stitching. I guess this is some sort of faux leather type marbled box. I'm not really sure, but I just thought it looked nice and it brought things together. Now, the way that I like to do this is I keep the tool in place, and then I actually just move the cake stand around. This ensures that everything stays relatively straight, or as straight as I can get it. Now I'm going to make the little ring portion, which is going to connect both of the ties of the box. I think the tie of the box also really adds to this. And all I'm using is a piping tip, and then I'm just taking a different tool here, two different tools, and I'm just puncturing that hole and then using this secondary tool to make the hole a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to connect those again by using that steam so that I don't have to paint or anything like that, or even use edible glue. And then I'm just going to make these ropes here. And I did make this with my marshmallow fondant. I'm going to do a separate video talking about really the difference between marshmallow fondant and store-bought fondant. Now you can do this portion with fondant, but I'm actually going to be using some edible wafer paper. And basically it acts just like paper, except when it gets wet, it tends to curl up and be a little bit more malleable. So I'm just steaming that a little bit, and then I'm folding it however I see fit to create that little tissue lining that is usually in these boxes. You can also create these boxes in a different way where it has the standing flowers, and you could put them on lollipop sticks. That would look really nice, but I wanted to have more of like a flower puff in here, like a big bouquet of flowers. So I'm going to line this whole area with tissue, and then we're going to cover that with the flowers. Sometimes I find that painting the wafer paper with water makes it almost too wet, so I really like steaming it instead because it kind of gives that natural wilt just like tissue paper normally has. I'm doing a mixture of roses and flowers that kind of resemble carnations as well. Now, you guys have seen me use this tool over and over again. And as you can see, I was going to use other tools, but then I thought, wow, I really love the look of all of these roses and carnations together. So I decided to just stick with that instead. And to make the carnations is really not anything different than making the roses. You just kind of pull out the leaves a little bit more with that tool and thin it out just a bit more. more so it looks more like a clump. Now this one here I will say is not the best example of the carnations that I did on here, but you get the picture. It's a little bit more ruffly than the roses. Do whatever mixture of flowers that you want to do though, and you could also do this in buttercream as well. Though I will say that would be a lot of buttercream. Now, I highly recommend that you put some sort of sphere or half sphere on the top of this cake so that you can create that ball without having to create so many roses. I actually ended up putting some little clumps of fondant underneath just to make sure that those flowers on top were raised a little bit. One thing I noticed that all flower boxes had when I looked them up was they have a nice tag on the front. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to actually put the monogram of the recipient on here. And if this is for your mom, you could put mom on there, or you could put her initial on there as well, and it will look really, really beautiful. And again, I'm going through with that tool, doing that lining on there as well, so it looks like it is all sewn in together. Now, before doing this portion, after I steamed everything, I did place it back in the fridge for about 30 minutes. This is just to get everything to solidify back up after it undergoes all of that steaming. Now, if you're steaming fairly lightly, your buttercream shouldn't melt or anything like that. But if you were a little bit heavier on your steaming, that can happen. So I do like to just make sure it's nice and solidified in the fridge. Now I'm just going in with a little bit of petal dust after everything is all dried up, and I'm really directing this towards the ends. Now, if you guys are makeup people, you will get some fallout from that petal dust, just like your eyeshadow. So you do want to make sure that you tap that brush really, really well so that you avoid as much fallout as possible. I thought I would start off by showing you the back of this cake. So rarely do we see the backs of cakes. It's always all about the front. But really, because there's so many flowers going on all around, I thought I would show you all of that detail. Now let's get into the pricing. Now, of course, you saw from the title how much I would charge for a custom order. And if I was asked to do exactly this, it would be $300. Now, this is a 6-inch cake, and I would deem it as an extra tall. Now, if I were to do this as a stock order, meaning it's always going to be available for a finite amount of time, of course, I would probably put these on pre-order. I wouldn't just have them all set up in the bakery. I would bring the price down, and I would really market it as a little bit of a deal because you are getting something that is worth around $300 and you're paying a little bit less for it. Now, you're still going to make money on this because this is one of those things that you can make in mass ahead of time. All of those flowers can be made well in advance, and the rest of the cake comes together relatively quickly. You could even make a little bit extra by offering specialized monograms or whatever you would like. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys.